You're listening to Bigfoot Society, and I'm Jeremiah Byron. Tonight's story doesn't come from a seasoned researcher or a lifelong believer. It comes from a retired cop and a former federal law enforcement officer who thought Bigfoot was just a myth. That is until the woods of North Georgia came alive. A broad-shouldered figure crossed the road in daylight. A truck shook, a tent was approached, and somewhere in those Appalachian foothills, the believers became the hunted. This is the story of Scott and Sheila Granger and the night Bigfoot came calling. So stay with us. All right, Bigfoot Society, you've got the privilege of talking to Scott and Sheila Granger today. Scott and Sheila are involved with Squatch-Fishing outfitters down there in Ellijay, Georgia, up there in northern Georgia. And listeners of the show might have heard of that area already. If you haven't, it's an extremely active area up there in northern Georgia. So welcome to the show, guys. How's it going today?
Going great. Thank you for having us.
Doing great. Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. I've been looking forward to this one for a while. How did you guys get involved with Bigfoot to begin with, and start up this outfitters business that you have?
Okay, let's see. Years ago we lived in South Georgia. I'm a retired police officer for a little over 20 years. Scott's retired federal law enforcement. We would watch all the stuff on television, and the biggest thing was Legend of Boggy Creek. That was my favorite movie. He had never seen it, and so I had him watch it. And I've talked about this nonstop. Back then I thought it was just like a unicorn. You know what I'm talking about? Like couldn't be really real. But we ended up moving up here to North Georgia about 8 years ago. Yeah. And I seen an opportunity to go on a Bigfoot expedition, and I lost my mind. Begged him to go. Let's go. He finally consented, and we went on that expedition, and that kind of like snowballed from there.
It did. It was it was kind of unique. She wanted to go, and I'm one of them fellers that I try to do everything I can do to satisfy your wife and all, because I like to eat, I'm like everybody else. I'm not going to miss a meal over not doing what she wants to do.
Nice.
But, so I went on the expedition with her, and we had a few things happen, that kind of opened my eyes on that outing. And, because I was probably the biggest skeptic in the world, I was that guy that I'd tell you quick, man, I have hunted and fished in the river bottoms and the swamps all my life, and I truly have. And I did see a lot of things during those times, and heard things that I couldn't really explain, but I never put two and two together about it. And after going on that first outing, and getting to hear some things, I opened my mind a little bit more and said, there could be something to this.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it got started off.
Yeah, that one weekend, we heard several things. Just if I had not been there and heard it with my own ears, somebody could have told me that, and I would have thought, man, you're nuts, you're crazy, you're whatever. And I wanted to believe so bad. We were so excited about it, but I kept telling Scott, I'm not going to say there's such thing as Bigfoot until I see it with my own eyes, and I'm 110% sure that that's when I'll admit it. And lo and behold, it was a few months later I got the opportunity. During the day at 2:00 that afternoon, about 25 yards away, I saw a Bigfoot. And from that point on, I went from being a believer to a knower, 110%.
Oh, man. It's okay. So there's a lot of stuff that happened to you guys pretty quick. I want to hear what kind of vocals you guys heard on that expedition. Like, what kind of things were you running into first?
You want to tell him?
Yeah. What happened? We had a friend that was on this outing with us that we had met, a good bit prior to this outing. And the night before the actual expedition started, we all load up in my truck and we take off to the woods. He's wanting to show us a couple of different areas. So we're heading up there, and Sheila sees something go across the road in front of us. Well, when she saw that go across the road in front of us, I got on the brakes, stopped, and we all bailed out of my truck. And at that time we had a full-size Ram, so we had 5 people in there. And I'm standing right in front of the truck, and Sheila and our friend, he goes on up ahead where whatever crossed the road up there. We're standing there and we're talking amongst ourselves, and the prettiest whoop you ever wanted to hear come from less than 15 yards away from us, right to the left of us. Well, we're in an area that we had never been in, and I say that telling you about that Ram because a Ram has a really good set of headlights on it that shine way out to the sides. And I'm looking over there where this whoop come from, and I look back at another young lady that's standing right there beside me, and her eyes are about as big as saucers. And she said, "Did you hear that?" And I said, "Of course." So we're looking for it, and never did see anything. But I mean, we got to hear it. And Sheila and our friend, they're up there, they're looking where whatever it was crossed the road, and some limbs are still wiggling in the way there where it had crossed. After that, our buddy, he told us, he said, these things are up here pretty thick, and he says they're real good to mimic things. Now, what I'm fixing to tell you, if there hadn't been five of us up there to witness this, I would never tell it.
And if I hadn't heard it myself, I wouldn't have believed it.
So he gets two rocks, and he collects them together twice. And right down from us, probably not 30, 35 yards, there's a small stream running. Something clacks two rocks back twice. And he giggles a little bit, and he clacks some rocks again two more times. And right off the bat, something down there clacks those rocks twice. So he's playing with that a little bit, and he said, "I wonder." So he done the shave and a haircut deal. The don't clacks with those rocks. And we're all sitting there, and this, whatever it is, mimics that back with rock clacks. And at this point, we're all, like in amazement and everything. And we are up here in the middle of absolutely nowhere in these mountains. There is no other person up here where we're at to, do anything like this back at us. And then we're all talking, and he says, he's telling us, he says, these things are extremely OCD about things. And he does the don't, and he doesn't do it anymore. And down at the creek, it goes clack, clack.
It finished it.
It finished it.
No way.
And, yes. And I'm telling you, if there hadn't been as many people standing there that all heard and witnessed this, I would never tell that story.
Yeah. And it's still kind of like, people are not going to believe this. And I wouldn't blame them at all.
No, not at all. I mean, because if somebody told me that, right off the bat, my first thing was saying, I believe your cheese is just about slipped off your cracker.
Quit using my hand.
But that happened, and we were there to witness that. And then we go on up the road. You have to kind of picture some of these mountain off the way roads. We get to the top of it, and there's kind of like a cul-de-sac area up there.
A dead end into just nothing but woods.
Yeah. And we get my truck turned around where we're pointed out, in the event something does happen or anything, we need to get out of there quick. And me and Sheila standing out behind my truck, probably 20 yards away from my truck. And our friend and a couple of people, they go on down a little trail. Well, we can see their red headlamps and everything as they're going down the trail. As they get on down the trail out of sight, we notice this area up here has like a next level down off the edge of it. Something extremely heavy starts walking around this terrace of this thing.
You can feel the percussion and hear it boom, boom.
Yeah. And as it's walking, you would think like something was just stomping. It was walking so hard. And it gets around toward the front of our truck, and you could hear it walk up towards us a little bit. And I told Sheila at that time, I said, let's ease on towards the truck. And she was like, why? And I said, well, I don't want whatever this is to get between us and our vehicle. So we start easing towards the truck. and our buddy had laid his cell phone on record on the hood of my truck, and as we're easing to the truck, that phone lights up. And which I didn't think a whole lot about that at that point in time. It, wasn't nothing out of the way to me. But we get up there, and when they get back, I tell him that, you must have missed a text or something, your phone lit up. Well, he looks at the phone, he says, that phone doesn't light up unless you touch it. And he showed me that phone doesn't light up, unless it gets touched. And which was pretty unique, to say the least, about that point right there. The rest of the weekend went off, small things happened, and not a whole lot.
Well, this was our first camping, real big camping, we were brand new to it. But later that night, we were in our tent and I heard something. He did too, walking across the river towards our campsite. And, I'm like, Scott. He says, I hear it. And it come to the little table we had up there. We had been cooking bacon earlier in the evening, and you could hear it. And I'm kind of freaking out over there. And this is no joke, because we had no idea what to expect. I heard Scott reach over there and unsnap his, holster, which that wouldn't have done any good, I assure you. And this thing is right beside the tent, and it lets out this big, like, exasperation kind of thing, and just turned around and started walking off. And again, you could hear the boom, boom, boom. Let me tell you something. I was so scared. Had that thing touched that tent, I would have jumped up and ran with tent and everything, probably laid myself out with a tree, but I was terrified.
But that, that kind of sets up the tone here. That was our first outing with this.
And they say, once you start down I'm going to tell everybody, if you start down this rabbit hole, be prepared for more questions you will ever have answers to. Mm-hmm. Either you're going to be addicted to it like we are, or you're probably never going to go in the woods again.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree 100%. Oh my goodness. Wow. So from what you guys had, the way you've been talking, it sounds like this was more of like a private expedition.
That one was it was, and that we went on, and we wound up after that helping that group out a good bit,
and just going out with friends we'd made from that group.
And the more we helped out with that group and everything, the more we seen how things were going in that group. And it's a big group, and very costly. And after we had done that for a pretty good while, we would always have people, when people would find out that we had went on these things and had been on them things, that a lot of folks had a lot of interest in it and really wanted to go, but they weren't willing to drop that kind of money on doing that. And we sit back and we thought about it for a lot and said, what could we actually do one of these for people, and make it to where there's not as many people there, and get away with money wise and at least break even. So we did that. And that's how Squatch-Fishing Outfitters got born.
Came to be. It took a while. It took over 1.5 years to get everything we needed to get, but it's pretty much our life now.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Wow. How cool is that? I mean, it's a thing where it's obvious you guys love going out there, and to make it a part of your life in that way. So now you're like, now I got to get out there. And it's just, that's awesome. How cool.
Yeah. We've met so many good people and become friends with so many people. We have a ball.
Yeah. And we've had, people leave an outing with us and become lifelong friends with other folks that were there.
Oh yeah.
That's a lot what it's all about. Mm-hmm. I also guide fly fishing, and we try to incorporate. That's how the name Squatch-Fishing Outfitters come about. We're trying to find something where it incorporated both of them into it, and Sheila come up with it one day. She said it, and it stuck from that point on.
Yeah,
I love it.
Our mannerism of doing things is, the group we had been associated with and going off with, they would take a lot of folks on an outing. And it seemed like when we were there prior to all the other people getting there, there would be a good activity happening and everything. And as soon as all the folks showed up, everything would kind of quieten down, which, stands to reason. You start introducing a whole lot of folks into the forest, all the animals and everything are still there. They just kind of hunker back and sit back and watch and remain quiet. So we brought it down to where we only take 10 participants at a time. And, a group large enough to be safe, but a group not so large to where it overwhelms the forest.
Yeah. I think last year's, was it last year, the very last expedition, we had a guy that was doing a documentary, Greg Ogles, very nice guy.
Oh, yeah.
Him and the young guy that helps him, we were going out to where we were going to go hunting that night, right? And so Scott was in the lead truck. We had like 3 or 4 vehicles. Scott was driving, Greg was in the passenger seat, and his friend was in the back seat. And had one run right across the road in front of them.
Oh, yeah. Both of the guys got to see it.
They were a little shaken.
Yeah, they were. They were. And here it is. We're filming a documentary and everything. And it's no cameras rolling.
No, yeah. No.
That's the age-old story.
Murphy's Law.
Yeah. Something truly amazing happens, and you're there doing this specific thing, but you don't have any cameras rolling.
But we did get footprints.
Yes, we did.
Where it went up the side of the ridge. The footprints we got, I think it was like 18 and a half inches. 17 and a half. It was awesome.
And, those guys were shocked and everything, and it was a very good outing.
But the best thing I enjoy, we've done this for a few years now. The best thing I enjoy is when new people come, with expectations. Oh, this is bull crap. This is not real, blah, blah, blah. And then something happens. And I'm thinking about the last year. We had a gentleman, he believed in it, but he's never seen anything. And we told him these jokers up here like to throw stuff. So he was standing there and all his rocks get thrown. And he about loses his mind.
He did. And that's, we have a pair, husband and wife team. They're both dentists. And she drug him to one of our outings. They come on a very regular basis. Super great people. And she was the believer. He was sure enough, just like me, big skeptic. And, but he wound up getting to see one first through a thermal. And after that moment right there, now he's ready to get up here every chance he gets now.
It was so funny because after he seen it, he come back down to the campfire and he sat there and didn't say a word. I said, "Are you okay?" He said, "Yeah, I'm trying to absorb what I just saw." You get quiet because your mind, I know in my mind, it took me about 3 days. I was trying so hard to convince myself there had to be a bear. There had to be a bear, but I knew it wasn't a bear.
Are you guys going all over North Georgia then, or you probably have to keep locations a little bit, in the back pocket, but is it all over like that Ellijay area or?
It is. We spanned out from Ellijay all the way over to Rabun County.
Okay.
And, in that region right there. And the big thing is we have several areas that we monitor very closely. And this isn't a weekend thing for us. This is a 4 to 6 day a week thing we do. And we keep real close observation on these areas. And that's how we determine where we're carrying folks, on our next outings and everything. Because we may have 2 areas that are very active at that point in time. And we always want to carry folks, to the area that's the most active at that point in time, to afford them the opportunity or the best opportunity and chance to get to
have an experience. Yeah,
have an experience or even possible sighting.
Now we've taken people out before and had to leave. Of course, if you see a mama bear with cubs, you don't want to stay in that area. Or if you get that feeling or something's being thrown or the growls and stuff, we're not trying to put anybody into any danger.
No, we push that envelope a little hard on ourselves, but with when we have other folks out there, we maintain the most safety as possible.
Yeah,
Right.
Scott, you said a phrase that it was real quick, but you said you have a group it was something like a group that's large enough to be safe. And what do you mean by that?
Yes. Well, when situation and things like what we do, you want to have enough people there that enough numbers like to show a little bit where you have it deters something from wanting to, encroach on you.
More than one or two
more
people.
more than one or two people. But not big enough to where it makes things shut down. And
we don't do this we have a crew that helps us, and thank goodness for them.
Oh, absolutely. If it wasn't for them, we couldn't get accomplished the amount of things we do. And that's what I mean by that. And I hope I answered your question.
No, I think you did. Was there a situation that you guys went through where you had to learn the hard way? Like maybe you didn't have enough people present and just things kind of escalated, or?
No, it happened it was me and Scott and a couple of others when we were out scouting. We weren't doing our thing yet. We were out scouting. We were bluff charged.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we were hard bluff charged, and that there were 4 of us, and that was it. And it weren't like we were all right there in a very tight knit group. We were kind of spread out a little bit. We're walking along, checking out some areas, and it's at night. And we heard it coming off the ridge above us to our right. And when it started coming, I mean, it was, oh my goodness, it was coming.
Like a Mack truck.
Yeah. Well, the mountain laurel up here in these mountains in certain areas, is pretty thick. And that stuff was tough. As soon as it started coming off that ridge, everybody spins their head around. So all the headlamps are pointing up at that ridge, and you could literally see that mountain laurel parting. I mean, as it was coming down. And it stopped within about 10 yards of us. I mean, just all of a sudden stopped. We don't know if it jumped over top of us, if it come to a trail right there, and cut off on a trail or something, or what it done, but it immediately stopped. But we were both braced for impact, and like you were going to get run over by a linebacker or something.
Yeah, I'd done prepared for, like a rabbit squatting down. Just.
Oh yeah. And then we've had some other things happen, where we've had things thrown, a small number of people there, and I mean some big objects thrown and things like that. It's and that's kind of where I get to have enough people to be safe, but not enough people to overwhelm things.
And I think people, when they come on these expeditions, especially the ones that are skeptics, that's the best ones. We had a couple that come, and he did get to see. Actually, they both got to see one firm that night. And we have a base camp, and they had put their camp or tent on the edge there, around everybody else's, and that's where they wanted to be. That's fine. But apparently, we got back 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. Everybody going to bed, settling down. They had some stuff happen to them, and they got up and sat around the campfire all night, too scared to go back to bed because of all the stuff that was happening. So it does follow you back sometimes. But yeah, I mean, they're both believers now, and
yeah, they are. And that's when we found out the next morning that they had both set up around that campfire all night long, and they're stoking that fire, keeping it going. I told him, I said, "Man, why didn't you wake me up?" And he said, very nice guy. He said, well, we really didn't want to bother anyone. I said, buddy, that's what I'm here for.
Bother me.
And needless to say, next day they did move their tent system on up there very close around everyone else.
I told Scott, I said, I don't think they'll come back. I'll be dog. They signed up for how many? 3 or 4 since then?
They've been 3 or 4 times since.
Oh, wow. That's an intense experience that they had. In these areas
it was for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. In these areas that your guys are going to, you know, I talk to people from all over the US, and there are definitely different, you know, sometimes people are seeing things that look like an orangutan, or sometimes it looks like an old man or a humanoid type figure. Is there are there any you know, common things that are usually seen in the sightings that your people are having when they are being taken out on these expeditions?
Explain what you were saying.
The one I saw, like I said, that was 2:00 in the afternoon, about 25 yards away. And it made a noise. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have looked that way. It made like a clicking noise. And I took a step back and looked about my 4:00. And it was behind a tree. And you're looking, this was in September, so there wasn't a lot of green foliage left or anything. I'm looking at it and it moves a little bit, and I'm seeing something. I'm looking at it. It's looking at me. There's no doubt. It was behind a tree. It had his hands around the tree, and his left shoulder was, on the left side, but the right shoulder's on the right side. So, I mean, he was way bigger than the tree is what I'm saying. And he was like a cinnamon color. But it looked like a huge person to me with no neck, with a reddish fur coat on, but the face, it had no hair on the face. It looked like clay. That's what, like gray clay. And I looked and I thought Scott, our friend, was right behind me, but apparently I went on up the ridge by myself, and I said, I remember saying, Scott, and he said something way down the ridge, and this thing starts moving a little bit more. I'm looking at him, he's looking at me, and then bouncing, and I said, Scott, like that. And when I did, it dropped down and it just dropped like a puff of smoke and was gone. Well, he recognized, something's wrong. And so they come running up the ridge. And when they get up there, I'm just shaking all over, like, just had a huge dump of adrenaline. And I tell him, I said, there was a Bigfoot there, and pointed. And my friend and I ran over to the tree. I had pointed out to Scott. And if I had called that over the radio, I didn't realize it was a decline. So I would have thought about 6 foot, but by the time I got down there and seen that it was on a decline, it would have had to been like 7.5, 8 foot tall.
Yeah. The ones that we're, typically encounter up here, they're more human looking than apish. They're more kind of, I would call it like Neanderthalic.
Yeah.
Looking. Everyone I've had the opportunity to witness have, you hear a lot of people say about the conical shaped head. Everyone that I've had the opportunity to witness has had a roundish, more round head, not that up jettisoned conical shape.
And no neck.
Yeah. And the no neck thing is just for from their traps, their muscles and everything being,
right.
You think of an Alabama linebacker, sitting there without his pads on, how he looks like he's trapeze muscles from the base of his skull out to his shoulders. That's kind of how these things are.
And they can move.
And that age-old saying of people say, well, they don't have any neck. They have to turn their body to be able to turn their head. That's wrong. These things turn their head. I've witnessed that personally in the daylight of them turning their head. And it's the only variation we have up here pretty much that we've encountered and noticed is color and size.
Yes.
We have seen black ones. Like Sheila said, that the one she's seen was a cinnamon color type brown. We've had people report to us of seeing gray ones.
Wow.
And one white one. But that, they have that, primate look, typical look, but more Neanderthalic, if you can imagine that.
Yeah. And I think at times, because we go to several different spots that we check on pretty routine, I think they recognize us.
Oh yeah, as much as we go.
Yeah.
Sheila, you said something in your account that made me almost fall out of my chair, and I'll explain why, but I have to be, it's going to be vague. So an individual reached out to me from Iowa. I'm in Iowa, and he had shared about how he's been checking out this area where there's been wood knocks happening, howls, but also there was a night where he had him and his friend there, and they started to be surrounded in this wooded area, and the creatures that were out there started clicking at them. And I was like, I've never heard the clicking thing, and I've been doing this for years. And when you just said clicking, I was like, holy mackerel. So is that a thing you guys are experiencing a lot down there, where there's like these clicking things happening?
Yes. And, at first I'm thinking, like I said, it had to be doing that to get my attention. Otherwise, I had no reason to look where I was looking, because I was at the top of a ridge looking over it, looking at the dirt roads and everything down there. And I had to take a step back and go to my 4 o'clock. But that wasn't the first time. We've been in the woods before and had the clicking. So we were associating it was wanting us to look that way, maybe while the other one moved to distract us. Well, then we just recently heard from other people that this is how do you want to say that? Like a mating thing or something like that. That's when I about fell out of my chair.
Oh dear.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now I don't have to compete with other fellas. I got to compete with a big hairy one.
I don't think they're looking for that. But I don't think so. Not a forest bride.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, we've heard the click. Maybe it's a tongue popping thing. I'm not sure how they do it, but it's definitely a click, and
it's very noticeable. It's not something that did I think I heard that? No, it's very noticeable when it happens.
The only other thing that really has freaked me out, Scott and I were we were hiking in the woods, of course, and we were going to set out audio. And we were way back in the woods, and I started hearing something. I said, "Do you hear that?" And he says, "No, I hear something off to my left." I said, No, stop, listen. It kind of sounded like somebody was like driving in a tent stake, that kind of repetition. But then all of a sudden, it was almost like you're in front of a gorilla cage. It was like it was building itself up. It done about 3 or 4 times, and the fourth one was like something was mad. Yeah. So of course we go down there to try to find it. We did get the audio put up, and we were gone for about 3 or 4 days. We come back, and we brought 2 friends with us, my best friend and her husband. So Scott and him went back in the woods to retrieve the audio, and she and I were around a fire. We were in the woods. We just went as deep as they were, and it was just me and her. And we're sitting there, and I start hearing stuff. And it was about dark. I start hearing something, and it's getting closer. And I've got all this on audio. And I said, "You hear that?" And she says, "No, I don't hear it." Of course, she's not going to let the fire go out. She was busy trying to put wood on the fire. I said, "No, sit down and listen." And it's the only thing I can liken it to, if you've ever heard an alligator growl, that real guttural growl. I got 14 on those recorded. It was coming up from the ridge, and it was getting closer and closer to us.
Yeah, there's 14 of those growls on that audio, and right at the end of the last growl, one of the prettiest whoops you ever want to hear. But and we were able to catch that on 2 different audios, on a recorder and on Sheila's phone recorder, which was pretty neat.
Yeah, I don't know. I sent it to a friend of mine, and they said that, they thought it was an alpha male, that, no women needed to be by themselves or children. Well, let me tell you something. Whew.
You were talking about your friend having a situation where they were out in the woods, they were thinking they were being, surrounded.
Mm-hmm.
This is another reason why, we use the number of enough to be safe. Me and Sheila and 3 of our other friends, we were out just camping one evening or over the weekend, and we had a situation where we were at, where we had at least three different individuals just outside of the light of our camp, tree knocking. I mean, these things were beating on trees like they were no tomorrow.
And whooping
all around us. And we were surrounded that night. And that was an extremely, very uneasy feeling.
You can tell about 2:30 that morning.
Yeah, that about 2:30 that morning, after we were all bedded down and everything, we've left lanterns and everything running this particular night because of all the activity and everything that was going on. We had something walk in behind our tent within.
We were in a camper.
No, that's different.
Oh, it's different. Okay.
Within 8 to 10 yards of our tent, and walk in, and I fully expected to start hearing the kitchen tent, the stuff, start getting rummaged through. And it didn't, but it walked in between our tent and our buddy. He that used to always go with us. He sleeps in a hammock, of all things. And it gets over there close to him, and you can hear it leaving out like it's going to go on past him. Well, it doesn't get probably 10 yards past his hammock, and he turns around and does a wood knock right there. Next morning, I asked him, I said, you heard that last night? He said, of course I heard it. He said, it's by the words, but he said, of course I heard that. He said, it was right there. And I said, did you see it? And he says, man, I did not open my eyes. Are you crazy?
That's the best thing to me. That's my most favorite thing is when you're asleep, and I love tent camping because you can hear it all real good. That walking reminds me of Jurassic Park, with that cup of water's there and the percussion. It just wakes you up from a dead sleep, and instantaneously that's what it is.
And what Sheila was asking me about was we had a little small camper, it was a little 13-foot, little behind camper. And we were in pretty close to that same location. We were up there, and we had bedded down for the night, and we had them whooping all around the camp, and they walked into the camp, and we had parked our Jeep right behind our camper right there. And we had two that were, sitting over there right in behind our Jeep just whooping. And we're giggling about, them whooping over there. And all that kind of settled down a little bit. And I had to cough all of a sudden. And when I did, I coughed really hard. Well, the moment I coughed, that little camper we were in got pushed almost off the blocks that it was on.
So it scared us, and we scared them.
Yeah. And then she asked me, she says, you going out there? I said, of course not. I'm not, because I know what's out there.
Yeah. The next day, we could see where something was on its knuckles, and had crawled up there that way. You could see really good knuckle impressions.
Oh, yeah. That we've run across and had, a lot of experiences and things, some good, some not so good, but overall, we've had a blast with it so far. We're not experts by any means of that word. I mean, we learn stuff. We learn from people we talk to. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that, to me, an expert would be a person that could tell you exactly what these things are, their origin, the whole 9 yards about them. There's no one out there with those credentials.
No, there's not. No, and no experts yet, for sure. Anyone that's been on any of your trips, have they ever experienced anything similar to what people call infrasound?
No, not really. We've had a lot of severe nervousness, but not that part. Yeah, headaches and nausea, but nothing that I would attribute to like the old thing where you hear people talking about getting zapped. And things like that with infrasound. Not really.
To me, it's almost like intuition, like when you shouldn't be there. We were in an old graveyard, and as soon as we got out, it was like you could feel the tension so thick, and it was not good. It's like your hair just stands up, and I told Scott, we need to leave. And everything was dead quiet, when you get out and there's no birds, nothing going on. But during that time, if I hear like a twig break or anything, I start taking pictures, because if you can't see it with your eyes sometimes, if you start taking random pictures, and I did get something on that.
Yeah, a good picture. That, try to take your photos in the direction of wherever you hear the least little thing. Is, the big things are obvious, and they're not going to show those to you too much. It's that little small twig crack or anything. That's what you're looking for.
Yeah, yeah.
And we utilize that on a lot of our expeditions. When I have a group out on the hiking group, I have one team member that he stays on the back side of our hiking group. He's monitoring both sides with thermals and behind us and everything. And one particular evening, we have something thrown at us from the right-hand side. Well, when things like that occur, it's his job. He starts scanning the entire area with thermals. And that particular evening, he caught one on the left-hand side. What come from the right was just a distraction. He caught one on the left-hand side over behind a rock, peeking up over a rock, watching us. Now, this rock's not 35 yards from us. And everybody's watching him through thermal, peeking over the rock. He's getting up high enough to where you can see his head, shoulders, arms, upper torso. So that went on for a pretty good while. And then I walked out there with this critter. My intention was for him, to get up and walk off or to run off so everyone could see him move away. One of my best friend's son, he's in his mid-20s. He asked me if he could go with me, and me and him had a short discussion about the do's, don'ts, and whatever's when we go out here. So I let him go with me, and we get out to this rock. I'm watching and paying close attention the whole time going out there. And I was almost out there to it, and my team member told me, he hollered to me, he said, "I don't see it anymore right this minute." So then I said, well, he's laid down behind that rock. He's going, and I told the young man with me, I said, be careful. I said, we get over here, this thing's liable to jump straight up and take off. So we get over there and we look around behind the rock with our headlamps, and there's nothing there. So immediately I pull out a big white light and shine in the direction I thought it may have went, and it wasn't there. And I'll start scanning the area. And as I come around, I put the light right in this thing's face. He is 15 yards away from us, squatted down with his back towards us. He's looking over, he has his shoulders turned, he's looking at us. Well, he had something on the ground right there that he was just not willing to leave. I don't know if he had a deer or what he had there to eat or whatever, but he wasn't willing to leave it. I told the young man that was with us, that's when I become very nervous. More so because I had him with me. And told him, I said, let's ease backwards away from this and ease on back to the group. So we did. The whole time I'm keeping not directly on him, but the cast of the light on where I could watch him. And we ease on back and get away from him. And then we kind of ease the group on away because, like I said, he wasn't willing to leave what he had. So at that point, that wasn't a really good place for us to be. And that's actually the closest I've ever been to one.
Yeah, he was a little shook up by that. Well, there was another time we were close to that same area, and I think this is kind of like in the beginning. And remember, we had the guy that you think they reached out and grabbed his ankle because Scott always tells everybody, if something happens, don't run. Because once you run, you become prey. And, Scott always tells them, I will tackle you if I need to keep you from running to get hurt. He said, now, if you see me or Sheila running, you better try to keep up.
Or if you hear one of your guys tell you it's time to run. Yeah.
Time to go.
But, yeah, that same particular area, I did have an individual take off on me. And I had checked this area the day before. I'd carried folks up there and had a small game trail leading up to this area. Game trail about 1.5 feet wide. All the foliage on each side of it was about between 2.5 and 3 foot tall. Well, that evening we have everybody up there, and there's 2 guys there watching one on thermal. And this individual, he's away from the group just a little bit, and he's panning around, with a night vision. He's looking around, and all of a sudden I hear it because I'm not 15 yards away from this individual. I hear the pop. I mean, it was that kind of pop that I honestly thought he got snake bitten. And that loud. And he stumbles around, about falls down, and goes to take off, and I actually catch him and get that all settled down because I think he snake bit at this point in time. So we pull them britches legs up and look, no wounds or anything. So he's on over there to where he was standing at, and I'm looking around. There's no rock there where something's thrown or stick or anything, nothing there. And I look at that game trail, and this game trail now is not 1.5 feet wide. It's all the foliage is pushed down to the ground, a good 1.5 feet more on each side of the trail. And it's that way for as far as I can look down the side of that mountain on that game trail. And after seeing that, I didn't say anything to anyone, but I kind of had it in my own mind what had happened. And it's, it was a pretty unique situation. Well, the next day, when I carry him all up there and he gets to get back up there to see where he was standing at and all that, he tells me then, he said, well, all that foliage, and he notices it. He said, all that foliage and everything's pushed down. Then I told him, I said, yeah, the day before you came here, that foliage wasn't pushed down.
That's the only time people talk about the smell. That's the only time we've ever smelled an awful putrid smell. I mean, it's like hitting a brick wall.
We smelled it before, but not like that.
Well, I mean, yeah, to that extent. We smelled musky, dog,
That particular evening, and you kind of have to picture this a little bit, because from where our sitting group is at a fire ring to where these individuals we hiked to is up the side of a mountain. Once everyone heard about these smells we're smelling on the way up this mountain, Scott went up the side of that mountain 3 times that night.
Good exercise.
It was, but I slept well. Just for everyone to get to smell these smells.
But I don't want, people say, I'd like to go on an expedition, but I can't hike in. It's not that, we stay at a base camp. Everybody's kind of camped together, whether you're in a small camper or tent or whatever. And then we don't go sometimes we don't have to go anywhere. We don't go too far away from that to where we'll go and build a fire, and whoever wants to sit there can sit there, and whoever wants to hike will leave to hike or change off back and forth. But to be honest with you, once you build that fire and just start talking, and you're their entertainment, they're going to come to you regardless. I mean, we've had them follow us back to the base camp. And we have,
in our hiking group, the hiking group gets followed back to the fire ring area too.
The very first expedition we ever had, Scott had one group and I had another. So we stopped in one area, and I mean, it was pitch black, dark, pitch black. We only had one guy in that group, and the rest were females. And I think was about 7 people I had, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And we were sitting around the fire ring, and out of the wood line, because we're totally circled by woods, out of the wood line, rocks started getting thrown. But it was funny because they were only getting thrown at the one male in the group.
Yeah, and everybody picked up on that, noticed it, that the only male there is the only person getting rocks thrown towards him.
Yeah, of course he was very uncomfortable. And I said, yeah, they don't want you here.
That's wild. Oh my goodness. Wow.
And us utilizing the fire ring, a sitting group and a hiking group, we do our best to accommodate anyone, that wants to do something like this. And it doesn't matter about their physical abilities. If you can't hike, that's fine. We have that sitting area that you can participate in. A lot of times the sitting area has as much or more activity than the hiking groups.
Yeah, that's true. And females, I don't know what it is. That's true. Females and children. Well, we have a lot of activity at our house. We did not buy this house with that intention. We had no idea when we bought our cabin, but we found out. And when our grandkids are here, activity increases.
Oh yeah, a lot. That's for sure.
Yeah. We've had them, let's see, jiggle the door handles, open the screen door, slam it shut. Our daughter-in-law was the biggest skeptic I knew of, and she got up one night and was going to go sleep on the couch, and that's when she says, I heard something walk on the porch, jiggle the door handle. She said, I got up, went back to the bed, and she said, and a couple of minutes later, it starts tapping under the window. Well, we had other people say the same thing that stayed here before. It taps under the window. It just, I guess we've gotten so used to it. We just, if it wanted to kick in the door, I mean, what are we going to do?
A few people listening to this are going to say, how do you, they're going to be like, that sounds like ghost stuff. Are there things at your house happening that make you think, oh yeah, this is absolutely 100% a Bigfoot related stuff that's going on?
We can slay it. This is no joke. When we first moved here, we were like laying in bed wide awake because, like I told you about the footsteps, you know, there's a little path at the end of our house that goes down there to the water, and I call it the pet cemetery path. I don't know why, but you could hear it run, boom, 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 boom. It would turn our motion detector, push them up. It would, oh my gosh, think what else?
Let me tell about the motion detector.
Yeah.
This home, when we first bought it, it had floodlights on all corners, but the floodlights were activated on a switch inside the home. And I went to turn the floodlights on one evening, and they didn't come on the back side of the house. And I thought to myself, I said, you know, that's pretty unique. Have both bulbs blow at the same time. Now, to get to this corner of our home, it takes a 12-foot A-frame ladder to get up there to change those bulbs. So I break out my ladder the next day, have me 2 new bulbs. I run up the ladder to change these bulbs out. When I grab the first bulb, it's loose. Well, it took 4 quarter turns to tighten that bulb back up. Well, I reach over and grab the other one. It's loose also, and it's the same exact thing. 4 quarter turns to tighten this bulb up. Well, now this house does not vibrate or have any kind of rattling in it like that to cause those bulbs to loosen up on their own. And I got to thinking, I said, wait a minute. So I run down the ladder, run back in the house, run over, flip a switch on, and the lights come on. And I'm laughing to myself. I left right then, went and picked up 2 motion detector lights for that side of the house and installed them. Well, when I installed them, I had them all set like I wanted them. Because when we're laying in bed at night in our bedroom, we can actually see that one particular light come on. So I'm laying there waiting on that light to come on, and nothing happened that night, the first night. But the second night, the light come on. I was like, oh yeah, we got you now. Well, the motion light at the other end of the house, Sheila's now a hospice nurse. So sometimes she has to work in the evenings and comes home after dark. So we set that one up so when she pulls in under the carport, the light will come on so she can see, a lot better to get to the back door. And I had it set just right for her and everything. Well, she pulls up one day and she says, hey, that light didn't come on. So I walked out and looked, and the motion detector head on that light was pushed all the way up to the roof line. Well, these heads on these things, when you put this light together, there's teeth on these things that interlock to hold them in position. And you can't hardly move that thing without breaking it and do that. I had to physically take that thing apart to pull the head back down to reset it. And it's, little things like that right there.
Well, we've been sitting at our fire pit in the front yard, and I know exactly 6:50, and it's recorded. And we're sitting there, and just right across the road. Now, mind you, we're on a dead-end road. There's 5 houses on this road, and you can't see each house. Like, I can't see the neighbor's house or whatever. And we're like in a basin in between mountains. But something started right there across the road, and I'm telling you, it would give you chill bumps. It was like the biggest whoop to begin with, and right after that, the coyote started kicking in, and it just in the house. Oh yeah. So I'm sitting there, and Scott gets up, and he said, well, I'm going to the house and get my gun. I said, well, I'm sitting right here, and I recorded that, and it continued doing like that the rest of the night. I mean, we can leave audio on the front porch, and get all kind of recordings. I can be in the bathroom getting ready in the morning, have the window up, and they'll start howling down the way there. It's just not unusual.
No, not a bit.
My goodness.
We've become used to the fact of it and everything. And a lot of our neighbors, one of our neighbors in particular, he's had a sighting out here, and he'll text me in the middle of the night and say, "Hey, step out on your front porch," and I'll step out on the front porch, and they're on the ridges howling.
And these things are smart. I'm telling you, they're observant. Scott was staying back and forth in Florida for a while. He was down there with family. And so I was here at the house by myself, other than, my little dogs. They know when he's not here. It might take them a day or two, but activity will increase. I've gotten to the point where it just don't matter. I'll come out here and go to bed, because if they wanted to come inside, there's nothing I could do to stop them in the first place. But about 4:00 that morning, I heard something out of that bedroom window. I just made a mental note of it. When I got up to go leave the next morning, I go around there and look where I heard the noise, and sure enough, there's a huge track right there. It's on our TikTok page. It was right there at the window, so that's not unusual.
No. And prior to me, fixing the motion detector lights, we'd be here at the house. The side of the house would get slapped.
Gas tank.
Our gas tank would get slapped. Our meter box. Something about that meter box. They love that meter box for some reason, but they will slap fire out of it.
There was one time our neighbor texted us and told us to step outside. He's at the very end of the road. Scott went out there first, and then he called me outside, and I go outside on the front porch, and something let out some kind of, I tell you what, it was like a war cry. It's the only thing I can liken it to. But again, I had that rabbit thing where you just don't know whether to run, what to do. It done that, and about 5 seconds later, on the other side of the house, there was another one that let out one like that. So I don't know if they were fixing to fight. I don't know what was going on, but it scared me to death.
And up here on these ridges, there seems to be like a clan that stays in this area all the time. And 2 times a year, in the spring and in the fall,
Picks up.
The activity around here picks up dramatically. And you can tell it's like 2 titans have met each other on the ridge side up there, because it will sound like a battle royale going on up there. And like I said, that happens about twice a year, in the spring and the fall here.
I've walked out of the back porch before, and you know what's, especially a woman, I know what's in my yard, what's in my little flower garden there or whatever. And I looked over there, and there was a quartz rock sitting by the front stairs, and I asked Scott, I said, "Did you leave that there?" So I think they do stuff like that,
Yeah. Like the rocks at the light.
Yeah. Did you tell them about that?
No, I didn't. You know how when you weed eat your yard and everything, you mow in your yard, you know what's in your yard.
Mm-hmm.
And I had just weed eated not a day or so before out behind the house here. And me and Sheila were out there for some reason, and we were walking around and looking, and there's 2 quartz rocks laying about 3 foot apart, parallel to each other. And I see these rocks, and I look up there, those lights. I told her, I said, "Let's come back, just after dusk dark and see something." So we waited till just before dusk dark. We walked down that path. And as soon as it was dark enough that I knew those motion lights would come on, I started walking up toward the house. As soon as I got to the quartz rocks, right at them, the light comes on. And I'm giggling to myself about it, because they're marking where that light comes on. So I pick their rocks up, and I leave them the same distance apart and move them forward toward the house about 3 feet. And I said, "Well, y'all won't know where your marker is now. You'll trip the lights." That night, they tripped the lights. And, it's like a game. Mm-hmm. And we call this playing a game sometimes, but, it's like a game. Okay, I caught you this time.
So, yeah, we enjoy what we do. Otherwise, we'd probably be traumatized and move in a big apartment in the middle of Atlanta somewhere.
Right. I mean, obviously, you guys are having some stuff happen around your house, and it is very interesting, the perspective, because all have things like you've just shared to me from people, and they will be just out of their mind, just like, what is going on? But I mean, you guys are into it, which is awesome. And it's on in how you look at it. I do want to ask, on expeditions, what do you think is the weirdest thing that has happened that's just like, God, don't really get what that was all about?
Probably your orbs.
Yeah. We were out on one evening, and we had an orb up here in a food plot of all places, and this orb was about the size and shape of a Nerf football. Well, this orb appeared, and it traveled down the side of that food plot for a distance of about 75 yards. And there are 4 of us witnessing this orb. And it's Sheila was in that area with us, but she was up in the area behind, where just out of sight, where she couldn't see this light coming, this orb. And once it got about 75 yards up the food plot coming directly towards us, it turned and went off into the forest and in behind the berm. But once it went in behind the berm, we couldn't see it anymore. It wasn't illuminated or anything like that. So we come back the next day and walk over there in behind that berm, and all the foliage is crushed down to the ground, like something had bedded and laid right there. In hindsight, thinking about it, I kind of wish we had walked over there to that berm that night, but we didn't.
Yeah, we're still trying to figure the orbs out.
Yeah, that orbs, that's unique. Haven't got a real good grip on that. I don't think anybody does.
I don't think
My
so.
thing is probably my thing is the tracks. We've seen tracks. I've seen tracks in the snow and follow them, and they just disappear. Where did they go?
Yeah, but when a track line just totally disappears in an area where, be it snow, soft terrain like that. I mean, if you're in some of this rock hard terrain, I totally understand them disappear, but
Not in snow.
in snow and soft terrain, when a track line just totally disappears, I mean, it's no longer there. And there's nothing around for something to jump up in the trees, to travel in the trees, where the trees aren't big enough to support something.
When we first got into this, we went down this rabbit hole. Scott and I both were in agreement. Okay, we're just going to concentrate on Bigfoot. I don't want to talk about all this other stuff that people are talking about, orbs, dogmen, all these other cryptids, blah, blah, blah. This is just too much to bite off at one time. But I'm telling you now, once you start down this rabbit hole, forget it, because there's so many branches, like I say, with the tracks, with the orbs, and that went a dog, Bigfoot, that was a dog man, that was this, it was that. I mean, it's just like you're going to have way more answers than you'll ever, or questions rather than you'll have answers.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I definitely agree with you. The more I talk to people, it's like, and the weird stuff is definitely part of it, and way more questions than answers at this point. I don't know if that'll ever flip around. We'll see. But man, guys, it has been just such a fun chat with you. I'm sure there's a few wrap-up questions, I would say. So you've mentioned a few times where you've taken photos, you've had audio recordings. Are there any places that people can see these photos and hear what you've recorded?
I post a lot of that on our TikTok page, Squatch-Fishing Outfitters.
And we utilize the TikTok page for posting stuff like that more so than our Facebook page.
And we encourage people. We enjoy this so much. We've been helping this little lady that's having a problem with supposedly a Bigfoot. We have not seen it yet. It might be a bear, it might be a possum, who knows? But she's terrified to death, and we're trying our best to help her. So, if people want to ask us if they're having problems, we can help them in any way, or tell them, give them ideas. We're all about that too.
Absolutely.
That's awesome.
We have a Facebook page, Squatch-Fishing Outfitters, and our TikTok page.
if people are like, it sounds like I would love to look into maybe checking out an expedition with you guys, what's the best way to contact regarding that?
The best way to contact us is, through Messenger on Facebook, through our Squatch-Fishing Messenger, or
Our phone numbers.
our phone numbers are on our page. They can text either one of us.
That's fantastic, man. It's you've got some really cool stuff going on down there. North Georgia is one of those places I just love to talk to people from North Georgia. Doesn't matter if it's the Northeast, Central, or Northwest. There's a lot of stuff going on in that state up in the north. But guys, definitely stay in touch. I'm sure you'll be getting into even more crazy things, but I'll have the links in the show notes for how they can reach out to you and maybe take part in an expedition themselves. But thank you again for coming on the show. It has been a fun time, guys.
Thank you so much for having us.
If you get over this way, come visit.
Come go with us.
Yes, sir. Just wanted to say thank you for listening to this episode of the Bigfoot Society podcast. Scott and Sheila's story is one that lingers, not just because of the rocks thrown in the dark or the truck that shook, but because it shows how quickly a life can change when you finally see what you thought was impossible. So huge thanks to Scott and Sheila Granger for sharing their powerful encounters from the forests of North Georgia and for reminding us that belief often starts with a moment you can't forget. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the channel on YouTube, hit that bell so you never miss a new one, and share this with a friend who loves Sasquatch, Appalachian lore, or just a wild story from the woods. And if you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please hit the follow button. And if you'd be kind enough to leave a review, it really helps other listeners find the show. And if you've had or know someone who has had a Bigfoot encounter, especially in North Georgia, around places like Ellijay or Rabun County, shoot me an email at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. I'd love to hear it. Also, don't forget Sasquatch Summerfest is coming up July 11th through the 12th in Oak Ridge, Oregon. Bigfoot Society listeners can grab a 2-day pass for the price of one with code BFS at checkout. Tickets are available now at www.sasquatchsummerfest.com. So huge thanks to Priscilla and the crew for making that happen. Thanks again for being part of the Bigfoot Society. Until next time, keep your eyes open, trust your gut, and never stop asking what else might be out there. See you in the woods.